Good, thank you. Now, it's a very, very important week this week. Tell us about it.
It is. It's Mental Health Week, and I think one of the key messages that I have here is that mental health is everyone's business. I think for many of us, we feel we're not the expert. It's a topic that we're too complex or difficult or outside our expertise, and so we don't broach it, whether we're an employer or an employee, colleague, friend, neighbour, family member. Mental health is everyone's business.
And everyone should talk about it, shouldn't they, Sabina? When I say that, I mean employers, employees, and have that door open.
Absolutely, and I know we've had so much over the years, particularly Are You OK Day has been an invitation for many Australians to check in with each other, but we know that we need to do more than that. And recent research from SEEK actually found that 69% of employees said that if they had a colleague they felt they could confide in, that that would help their mental health. And also in this complex era of COVID, I think it was about 53% of Aussies in the SEEK research said that they're more aware of their mental health than ever. So we know as we're in have changed the way we think and feel, particularly in the workplace. And we need to keep having these conversations more than just how are you doing. We need to take it a step further.
It's a complicated world at the moment, probably more complicated than we've ever seen it in our lifetime. It's difficult for people in their mind sometimes to raise these kinds of issues because in the back of their head they think, oh, will this be held against me?
Yeah, so you're talking there, Tim, about if it's your own personal story, is it okay to disclose, and how much will I share of my own story? And as you say, will that get me in trouble? Will I be penalised in some way in the workplace? I think that every employer has a responsibility to create a culture where discussing our mental health is no different than discussing our physical health. And there are some really practical ways to do that I'd love to share with you today.
Tell us.
Yeah, so if you have concerns about someone, instead of called joining the dots, which is what a lot of us do, is we sort of think we can see some behaviour that we might recognise in someone else, and then we go launching in to say, I think you seem somewhat depressed or you seem more anxious than usual, and that's not our role if we're not a health professional. What our role is to observe tangible changes in their behaviour, practical changes that we've noticed from their typical baseline behaviour. So a sentence as simple as, hey Tim, I've noticed that you're more reserved than usual. How are you doing? Are you doing okay? And it's difficult for you to then feel the need to defend yourself or like I'm judging or criticising or diagnosing, because I've observed something that both you and I can see, and you might then be able to talk to why you've pulled back, what part of you is feeling more reserved, and that's a really good way to open a conversation. I think it's so important that we don't use diagnostic terms when we're not mental health professionals, but just to check in based on it.
Finally, Sabina, you mentioned this whole idea of ruminating, and a lot of these thoughts are just created and they wouldn't hold up in a courtroom. But how much do people need to divorce themselves from the news cycle? Because life is so different. You can pick up your phone and you can read what's going on, and often the news is bad news. How often, how important is it for people to realise that their lives, well, they're not different, but not every news story has to attach to them?
Absolutely, Tim. I'm so glad you raised that point, because we are what we consume. And with regards to a news cycle, and as you say, this is on our phones constantly, 24/7. And if we continue to look and read and absorb headlines that are about doom and gloom and how the world's going to end, which is kind of what a lot of the messaging is, then we take that on board. So I think it's really wise to limit, I'd say once or twice a day you'll check in. It's important, of course, to be informed from reputable and reliable news sources, but to be constantly sort of wondering, when is this going to end, and what do the new restrictions look like, and when will they be lifted, and what stage are we at, and is actually just feeding the beast. And so I think once or twice a day is plenty to check in, to be informed, but as they say, not alarmed.
So important, isn't it? Just go for a walk, play some lovely music, cook a meal, read a book, do something, play a board game.
Yes, so Tim, what you're tapping into there, and it's something I observe time and time again, is that so many of us know what we need in order to keep us above board, to keep us floating, to keep us even thriving. And yet when we don't do those things, we notice ourselves going under. And those things are typically small, they're not rocket science, just like you said. Exercise, moving the body, getting a good night's sleep, our issues, our thoughts and our problems through with someone else. All of these seem like small steps, but when we don't do them, we notice the impact. So I think it's a reminder. Another thing I like to say is if we all had the capacity to write our own best-selling self-help guide, I think we would be able to say, or I could say, what would be in Sabina's best-selling self-help guide for how to manage my mental health. And I think, Tim, you would be able to write your own chapters. So we've got this sense of what we need as individuals. And when we don't honour that, it doesn't serve us well. So really, I think that's a reminder we're in the driver's seat here. What can we do that we're not doing that we typically know serves us well and improves our mental health and sense of well-being?
Absolutely. Sabina, it's been a delight, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Tim.
If you or anyone you know is feeling distressed, you can call Lifeline 13 11 14, lifeline.org.au/get help. Now, changing subjects, the bold and the beautiful, more like the daring and the dummy, one of America's best-known soap operas went viral after an actor kissed a mannequin on screen instead of his co-star. But that's just